Hello, good morning. Just before I begin, I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to be sharing my screen during the Zoom minute meeting. I decided to do it on Zoom so that way I could share my screen with you, and the things that I share on my screen would be things that I would write on the whiteboard in the classroom or project on the projector in the classroom. Since I don't have a projector of my own and my whiteboard is generally small and I wanted you to be able to see kind of the things that were going on a little clearer. So I'm just going to put those in a kind of share my screen format. And like I said, all those things would be something that would be on a whiteboard or on a projector, but just easier for since we have to do this over Zoom. But I will now share my screen and then I'm going to begin the lesson. All right. Good morning, boys and girls. So welcome back to class. We are going to today continue talking about our wonderful butterflies that we have been learning about. And we're going to actually today create a sensory poem about the butterflies that we have been learning about. So before we begin learning how to write a sensory poem and what a sensory poem is, let's just review what we talked about yesterday. So yesterday we read a book about the life cycle of butterflies, and we wrote down some amazing, interesting, fun facts that we found in the book that we thought would be great to write down. So I'm going to I want everyone to look at the whiteboard, and we're going to read some of those facts. I'm going to read them off to you, those facts that we wrote down. All right, so butterflies first start out as caterpillars. Baby caterpillars are less than an inch long when they come out of their egg. Caterpillars have 16 legs. After 10 days, the caterpillar becomes a chrysalis and the butterfly starts to develop. Butterflies have 6 legs. Butterflies' wings are covered with tiny scales. Butterflies use the straw-like tube on their head to sip nectar. Butterflies measure to be about 4.5 inches from wing to wing. Butterflies fly south for the winter. And there are more than 15,000 different kinds of butterfly species, which is just crazy. Wow. And butterflies use their antenna to smell. So after looking at those fast facts, kind of remembering what we read about the life cycle of a butterfly book that we read yesterday, I want you guys to just think, and I want someone to take a few moments and think how you would answer this question. And I'm going to ask you to describe the different stages of a butterfly's life cycle based on the book that we read yesterday. All right, can someone please kind of share with some of the first part of it? Right, so first we start with the little egg where the caterpillar is born, right? Right, and then the caterpillar, he's growing, right? And then the caterpillar makes a chrysalis, correct? And what's happening inside the chrysalis? Yeah, the butterfly is forming, right? And then eventually what happens? The butterfly breaks out of that shell. The butterfly kind of spreads its wings and the butterfly continues to grow. And that's kind of the overview of, the life cycle of a butterfly. That was wonderful. Thank you for all your help and your participation. All right, boys and girls. Now, continuing on, I want to talk about some of the academic language that we've seen in our book. And we've seen in our fast facts that we wrote down as well. And they were in our fast facts. And I'm going to go over those 3 words and the definitions that we have written out for us here. So nectar is a sugar-rich liquid produced by plants that attracts pollinating animals. Chrysalis is the protective case made by a butterfly, which was in one of the stages you guys also mentioned. And then antenna is the feelers on the head of insects used to feel and smell. So now that we've seen the words and we've went over the definitions, let's go back to the text because these were all in our text. Let's go back to the text and see where those words were used, and let's look at the pictures to help us and how they were used in the text to help us get a little more information about what these words really mean and what they are. So I'm going to project on the screen the pages of the book that we need so you can draw your attention to the projector. So for our first one, I will read the page. Soon the butterfly can fly. It flutters from flower to flower. The butterfly has a straw-like tube on its head. It pokes the tube into a blossom to sip nectar. Nectar is a butterfly's food. So from after reading this and getting to see this picture, we can now understand a little bit about what nectar is. Right? Nectar is a butterfly's food, and it comes from where? From flowers, right? And what other animals do we know also collect nectar? Right, bumblebees, right. So we have better seen, and we can see in this picture too, which is a really awesome visual, the butterfly using his little tube-like antenna to get to that nectar, which is really awesome. And nectar is not something, as you can see, that you can't really see just by looking at a flower, but it's in there in the center. So our next one, we're going to look at the next page, and we're going to go all the way at the bottom of this page and look at that small little paragraph. That's the one that we need to look at. So butterflies don't have a nose. They smell things with their antenna. So we know that butterflies use their antennas for what? To feel and smell things, right? Like we said in our definition. And here, do butterflies have noses like me and you? No, they don't, right? They don't have noses like us. That's what we use to smell, right? But butterflies don't have that, so they have antennas, so they can, you know, feel and smell the things that the food that they're about to eat or the things around them. And then lastly, we have a beautiful picture of a chrysalis. So the caterpillar has become a chrysalis. Inside the chrysalis, incredible things are happening. Nature is putting on a kind of magic show. It is turning the caterpillar into something new. So here we see a picture of a chrysalis, which is a great visual. And what is happening inside there? Right, the caterpillar is changing into a butterfly, right? And what does this shell, why does the caterpillar create this shell? Right, the caterpillar creates a shell to protect, you know, the changing of the caterpillar into the butterfly. That is 100% correct. So great job, everyone. Great job, boys and girls. Thank you for the participation. Those were, you know, our academic language, and we're going to see them again, and they're going to pop up again later today. But we got to review them and see them in our text, which was awesome. So next, I think we can now move on into our sensory poem part. So as I said in the beginning, we are going to be writing sensory poems with the information that we've learned about butterflies, and we're going to make a poem about them. So what is a sensory poem? So I have the definition here for us. So a sensory poem is a poem that is written about things that you experience. It's based on your five senses. So it's based on sight, smell, touch, taste, and feeling. And hearing, and used in this type, and all of our senses are used in this type of poetry. So all five senses, so our sight, our smell, our touch, our hearing, and our feeling are all going to be seen and used in this poem. So that's an important thing to remember, boys and girls, that in this type of poetry, you are going to see all five of those senses included in the poem, and you're going to include them in your poem as well. So I'm going to read some examples for you of sensory poems so we can get a better idea of what those are going to look like and how ours might look like. So number one, I'm going to read it off. So the lunchroom. So the lunchroom is fluorescent pink. It tastes of brown paper bags and smells like oranges and sour milk. It sounds like a brass band, and it makes me feel like throwing up. So what is one thing that we talked about in our definition that this poem had? Exactly. Wonderful job. So it has all those five senses. It has see, it has taste, it has smell, it has sounds, and it has feeling. So now let's go to another example. So this one's called chicken noodle soup. So I hear slurping. I smell chicken. I see yellow broth. I feel slippery noodles. I taste salty vegetables. So again, here, boys and girls, we see that all of our five senses are being used. And something else I want you to note is that they're not in the same order as in the first poem. So in the first poem, we started with see and then taste. And the second poem, we did hear and then smell. It doesn't have to be in any specific order. Just however you want your poem, whatever makes sense for your poem and what you're talking about. If see makes sense going first, if hear, if smell, if touch, whatever you want to put first, and however the order you want it to be, that is perfectly fine to your poem and whatever you think would make the most sense for your poetry when you write yours. So it doesn't have to be in any particular order. That's another important thing to note, in that it has to have all those five senses. Here we see in the second one a more kind of like structured format. We see I hear, I smell, I see, I feel, I taste, and we're going to get practice using that format too. But I want you to know that it doesn't have to be like that. So like in our first one, the lunchroom is fluorescent pink. They didn't say I see, but you can tell that that's the sense they're using because it was what you would see in a lunchroom. And it can be the I see, I hear, I smell, I feel, I taste kind of way, or it can be like our lunchroom one. It can just simply state, you know, the lunchroom is fluorescent pink. You can describe the sense that you are feeling. You don't have to state what sense it is necessarily in your poem, but we will have practice more, and we're going to get used to it more. So next, I'm going to model for you how we would start to write the sensory poem. So we've seen some good examples and talked about that we have to have those 5 senses included in our poetry, but I want to model for you how you would kind of go about creating a sensory poem. Now remember, ours is going to be about butterflies, but for this one, we're going to make it about the park. So I'm going to go down into this is our example. So the park is, so this is kind of already formatted and structured out for me. I'm just going to fill in the blanks and show you how I would kind of do that. But again, including the see, taste, smell, sound, feel, and also I could definitely do I see, I feel, I taste kind of poem way too. But the first thing I like to do when I'm thinking about a sensory poem is I like to close my eyes, and I want to think about what the topic of my poem is. So for us right now, for my poem, it's going to be the park. So I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to picture myself in the park, boys and girls. And I want you guys to do the same. So close your eyes and picture yourself in a park. Now think about some of the senses. Think about what you're hearing. Think about what you're seeing. Think about what you're smelling. Think about what you're tasting. So think about those 5 senses at the park, okay? So now I'm going to open my eyes, and now that I had some time to think and visualize myself at the park and go through, you know, this, what I would see, taste, smell, hear, and feel, I'm going to kind of start writing my poem. So the park is, so when I closed my eyes, the first thing I saw is a bunch of kids. So I'm going to write the park is filled with kids, because that was the thing I saw. And boys and girls, when you closed your eyes, the first thing you might have saw might have been something else, and that is definitely okay. So that's the wonderful thing. That's how our poems are each going to be different, because when we visualize and we write our sensory poems, it's going to be different to us, or how we see it, or what we think, what we picture when we think of, you know, the park, or what we picture when we think of the lunchroom, or what we picture when we think of butterfly. So everyone's is going to be different, and that's the wonderful thing about our sensory poems, because they're going to use different things, and they're going to be really awesome to read that way. So now that we have that, so the park is filled with kids, that's what I see. Let's go on to taste. So it tastes of, so I'm going to close my eyes and think, see, for me, the first thing I think of, I'm like, oh, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Because whenever I went to the park, my mom would always bring peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So that's the thing that I taste of when the park comes to mind. So I'm going to put a taste of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. All right, boys and girls, so now that we have that, so we have the park is filled with kids. It tastes of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So again, I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to think about smell. I'm going to have you guys help me out with this one. So when you're at the park, what do you smell? What do you smell? Can someone give me one? Yeah. Okay, that's a good one. So, and smells like the sweat of other children. That's a good one. It's definitely, with all those kids running around, you're definitely going to smell some sweat. So that one's good. So now let's do it again, and I'm going to ask somebody else to come up with one. So what do you hear? So it sounds like, yes, that's great. It sounds like kids screaming. That's definitely, you definitely could hear that in a park. And last but not least, and it makes me feel like, what does it make you feel like when you think of the park? That's a great one, tired. You feel tired. So now we filled in our whole poem. So now we can read it. The park is filled with kids. It tastes of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and smells like the sweat of other kids. It sounds like kids screaming, and it makes me feel tired. So that is a wonderful poem, and we included all our 5 senses. We had everything that we needed for our poem. We included the see, taste, smell, hear, feel, and we included those, and that's what we needed and make sure we had. And we came up with different things together. Now, like I said, it doesn't have to be in the see, taste, sound, sound order. It doesn't have to be in that specific order. I could have put taste first. I could have put smell first. Could have been in any order I wanted it to be. And I want you guys, boys and girls, I want you guys to remember that you don't have to have the same as everyone else. You shouldn't have the same as everyone else, boys and girls. You should have poems that are different, because when you close your eyes and you visualize the park, you are going to think of something different than from your neighbor. You're going to think of something different from, you know, anyone in your class when you think of the park or when you think of butterflies. So remember that we're not trying to match everyone else's. It's not about like what is right or wrong. It's about what you sense and those feelings that you see, taste, smell, hear, and feel when you're writing your sensory poem about whatever it may be. So today will be our butterfly, right? All right, boys and girls. So now we are going to go into writing our sensory poem. So here I have projected, I'm going to pass, you're going to have one for yourself. You're going to have a sensory poem passed out to you. And it's going to look like this. You're going to have a worksheet yourself for your own. And it's going to have that format: I see, I taste, I smell, I hear, I feel. Again, our final poem does not have to be like that, but it's just how this one's organized. This is going to be our rough draft for our poem. So we're going to write our poem on butterfly. So when you're writing the sensory poem, I want you to visualize that maybe you're in a butterfly garden. You can think that you are a butterfly, or you can think you're just outside and you see a butterfly. However you want to kind of get into that to help you start picturing that, closing your eyes and picturing that, that is fine, as long as it's about butterflies. And you're going to go through it and you're going to say, I see. And you list a couple things out. Give yourself some options, because this is just our rough draft. So we want to just, you know, brainstorm. And then you can pick later on which one you think is going to work best for your poem. So if you want to see, I see the scales on the butterfly. I see 15,000 species of butterflies. I see the butterfly sipping nectar. List a couple things out. And later on, you can go back, like I said, and choose which ones work best and continue on like that. So go, I taste. What would you taste? What would you smell? What would you hear? What would you feel? And then at the bottom, there's a little box where I want you to write out the complete drum. So this will be like your finished rough draft. So after we kind of brainstormed kind of some of the things that we might include in our poem, go back through it and say, now I'm going to put together my poem. I'm going to write it out, and I'm going to decide what I want to be in my poem. So feel free, like I said, to change the I see, I taste, I smell. You can use that format in your poem. You definitely can, but feel free to change it if that's what you want to do for your poem. And this is where, in the little box down here, is where you decide out of your options. See, I listed, like I said, I listed 3 different ones of things that I would see, and I choose, ooh, I want to say I see the 15,000 different species of butterflies. That's the one I want to use, which is what I'll write in my box for the C section of my sensory poem. So I'm going to give you a few some time to work on that, and you're going to have some time to, you know, brainstorm and make that final rough draft at the bottom there. So I'm going to pass out the worksheet, and you guys are just going to start visualizing, start thinking, close your eyes if you need to help you write that sensory poem, and start thinking of some of those things you would see, taste, smell, hear, and feel. Okay. Okay, boys and girls, now that we've had some time and I saw some really great work happening, so you were all doing a really great job working hard on those poems, and I saw a lot of different great ideas, a lot of different tastes, smells, and sounds. It was really awesome to see. And now that we're all kind of finishing up with our rough draft, our final rough draft product, we are going to continue on to do our final product. So next I'm going to give you, and I'm going to project it on the screen, but you're, again, going to have your own copy. It's a butterfly cutout template. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your final poem, which you should have written in the box at the bottom of your paper, and I'm going to ask you to write your poem into here. So I want you to write your sensory poem into the butterfly, and then you're going to cut it out and you can decorate it. And these are going to be hung around the room. Now, you can put your sensory poem in this butterfly. You can definitely do that because we worked really hard on the sensory poem, so you can do that. But we've also talked about other poems in this class. So feel free to also do, I know yesterday we talked about a couplet poem. And just to remember, a couplet, remind you, a couplet poem is a poem with 2 lines that are the same length and they rhyme. So this would be an example, and one of the ones we looked at previously is Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. Jack jump over the candlestick. So they're the same length, they rhyme, and they're only 2 lines. So you could do a couplet poem as well for your butterfly, inside your butterfly, if you wanted to do that instead of a sensory poem, because that is wonderful too, because we learned about those previously as well. So whichever one you want to do, put it in your butterfly, write it nice and neatly in pencil first, then go over it and trace it with marker or pen, make it look nice, then decorate your butterfly, color it in, add, you know, different things to it, because these are going to be hung around our classroom for all of us to see, and so we can all see and read each other's poems, and it's going to be really fun. So now I'm going to give you some time to finish those poems and write them down in our butterfly cutout template. I'm going to pass that out, cut it out, and be creative with it. All right, boys and girls, next I'm going to be passing out an academic language worksheet. So we've talked about some great academic language like nectar, chrysalis, antenna, couplet, and sensory poem, and I'm going to give you a worksheet as you're finishing up with your butterfly poems. You've turned them in, and you're going to take one of these worksheets to fill out. And just to kind of review some of the words that we went over, the academic language that we went over. And we're going to finish this performance task sheet, and just to review those definitions and kind of what those are, so we make sure we really have those. So in our first part, we're going to just say what a sensory poem is and what has to be included, what a couplet poem is, and then we have our nectar, chrysalis, antenna definitions, and we have to match them, and we also have to match them with a picture. So as you finish your butterflies, go ahead and turn it in up at the front and take a performance worksheet for academic language. All right, and then I will give you a few moments to do that. All right, boys and girls, now that we've had some time to finish that academic language performance task worksheet, now I just want to wrap up our lesson. So we have talked about and written a lot of great things today, so I really appreciate your participation and your hard work today. So boys and girls, we learned how to write sensory poems, right? Remember, sensory poems include all the 5 senses. So it includes smell, it includes touch, it includes feel, and it includes hearing and taste, right? It includes all those 5 senses, and we included them in our own poems. So we also reviewed our academic language, right? And sensory poem being one of them, but also we reviewed what a couplet is. Remember, it's a poem with 2 lines that rhyme and that are the same length. We talked about nectar, which is a sugar-filled liquid made by plants that attracts pollinating animals, like we learned about, like butterflies, and there's other insects that it attracts too. We learned about what chrysalis is. It is the protective case made by a butterfly. So when the caterpillar is ready to turn into a butterfly, it forms the chrysalis where it's protected and where all the change is happening inside. And then lastly, we learned about the word antenna, which is the feelers on the head of the insect that the insect used to smell and feel. So like we had talked about before, our butterflies don't have noses, and they use their antennas to smell things and to also feel around. I also wanted to ask, just before we go, we talked about sensory poems, we talked about those couplet poems, and we just reviewed our definitions. What are some of the differences? Can someone answer that for me? What are the differences between the two, based on our definitions and the work that we did in class? Right, sensory poems includes our 5 senses. Right, a couplet poem is only 2 lines. Right, a couplet poem has to rhyme, where a sensory poem, it doesn't. Yeah, and those couplet poems have to be the same, that they have to be the same length and size for those two lines. Perfect, wonderful, boys and girls. So we learned about our sensory poems, we learned about our couplet, we got to do some more couplet poems, and we learned about our antenna, our chrysalis, and nectar. And you all did a wonderful, wonderful job today. So thank you so much. And we have some beautiful butterflies that were created and that you're going to see hanging around the room. And I want you guys, once they're hung up, take the time, take the opportunity whenever you do have free time to, you know, look up at those and read the different poems that your peers came up with, because they're really awesome and I'm really excited to read them. So I just wanted to wrap it up with that. So finish up your worksheets for the academic language. Once you have finished them, I want you to bring them up to the front, and once you're done, go back to your seat and you can silently read until we move on to our next thing. So thank you so much, boys and girls.